Welcome back to the Better Learning Podcast. This is Mark Barga. I'm here with the one and only Larry Levato from Crabtree, Rohrbaugh. Larry, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here.
Larry, you're very familiar with the podcast and our A4LE audience, but I'd love for you to give these folks a little bit of your biography. How did you get to this point of your career? How did you end up designing schools in the first place?
Sure. That's a good start. I actually was an architect up in Massachusetts for a number of years. My wife's family's from Pennsylvania. So we were coming down here all the time for vacations, to see family, events. And one day my brother-in-law said, you live outside of Boston, you got a 4-hour commute to go 30 miles. I spend an extra 4 hours a day with my kids than you do. Have you ever considered moving to another market? And at the time we had our first child. So here we are, kind of just my wife and I, my wife Lee. We have our first child, but there's no family around us. We have no support system. So we came down for Easter one year, had the nice 6.5-hour drive back. She has me captured in the car. This was her MO, has been her MO for the 34 years we've been married, and says, hey, if you want to move, I'll move with you. We'll go wherever you want to go. But I think it would be nice if we had some family around the kids. So I came down Labor Day that year, interviewed with a couple firms, and I walked into a firm, did K-12 work. That's all they did. And I'd never done a school in my life. And he said, how can you help me? I said, look, I can figure out a budget. I can figure out the process. It's really the client relationship that I want to focus on. And he hired me. I've never done a school project. So that was 27 years ago. Here I am.
What type of architecture were you doing previously? And I'm actually curious, did any of that prior architectural work inform your approach to schools?
So I did corporate. I did a whole residential gig for a few years. Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, Beacon Hill, really prestigious houses, historic renovations. Actually, for a while, I was building houses. I built houses in Cambridge, Mass for 4 years. So I was out in the elements for 4 years and really realized I have this degree in architecture. Well, let's go back to the architecture side. Let's see what that office environment is. So I think those experiences all lend to architecture. I just knew that there's a lot of opportunity in the field of architecture. So I wasn't opposed to going in any one direction. I just hadn't been exposed to education at that point. So when I came here and okay, well, I got to learn another process and I got to learn, but that client interaction didn't change, right? That is still a mainstay. You have a client, they typically have a budget, they have a need. What's the best way to marry the two? So that's kind of where I've focused.
Well, and you having a holistic perspective on the design process and also the client experience, you've done a remarkable job becoming an expert in educational design and some of the philosophies that go into education, right? So you've seen a lot of trends, right? You've seen a lot of cycles in architecture. So trends come and go, glass, everything, academies, technology everywhere, lots of different, open plan, collaborative zones. Some of these things have real durability and permanence. Some of them are just phases. I'm curious, as you're guiding your clients and you're working with them, how do you help them navigate the difference between something that might just be a flash in the pan trend and something that actually taps into deeper educational principles?
In every aspect of architecture, there's trends. I think the focus, again, going back to that client focus, they don't know what they don't know, right? The majority of our work is K-12 public education. It's a little different than private, but in the public education, we hear a lot more terms of equity, or we don't want a school within our district or our system that is completely different or more advanced, more modern, more technology advanced than others because it gives an unfair education advantage to students. And then your cream of the crop teaching staff is going to want to work out of that school, right? So I think we need to hear them. Crabtree Rohrbaugh has a 42-year history of client-oriented approach to architecture. We have to listen to our clients. But we also have the ability here, and this has been one of the better places I've ever worked, to go out and find out what's going on out there. Go hear the conversations, go to conferences, get in the professional development role, understand what education means, not just building a box, building classrooms, or putting a program down on paper because you can. Let's go understand what that really means. And a lot of times in both the firms that I've worked with in the last 26 years, it's been that conversation of, if we have an educator on our team, on our architectural team, just being around them and watching their interaction and their understanding of how education is delivered. Because everybody says, well, this is a great environment for the kids. And I back that up and say, this is a great environment for those adults that are teaching in that space. Those educators are in that environment more than the kids on a daily basis. And are we doing everything we can so that they can be at their best of their profession?
It's such an important balance you're pointing out there of figuring out, well, what is the relationship between a student-centered environment and an educator-centered environment? And these really are people within a learning community, right? In your experience and in your travels, both in school design, but also in the broader architectural community, we of course rightfully design with students in mind, but as you point out, teachers, and myself, a former educator, they really are the gatekeepers for student experiences in a lot of ways, right? So talk a little bit about how school design, architecture, interior design, the work you've done, can play a role in elevating teacher performance and really uplifting professional culture, which we know is a critical need for teachers across the country.
One of the things, and we can talk more about it, but A4LE, and I was a member when it was CEFB, Council for Educational Facilities Planners. It changed its acronym to A4LE, Association for Learning Environments, as you know. When you go to those conferences and are in those seminars and sessions, hearing your peers, hearing the educators that are part of that environment, taking the lessons learned, but also hearing the conversations that they're having, it's really elevating that conversation about, hey, don't forget that you have a whole professional part of this school that you're doing. And that professional staff wants to thrive and grow as well. Don't miss the opportunity, one, to engage them, push to get those engagements, make sure it's not being just pushed on you from the administration, but engage those teachers because they have thoughts too, and they want to bring that to the table. And so they want to feel elevated. They want to feel important. They want to feel that they can build a better mousetrap. They're at the point, they call it the tip of the spear. They're the ones right there with my kids every day. And I want them to be in their best environment and their best opportunities. So that's always been our conversation. And I think A4LE has really promoted that. Having educators is part of our, community, like I said, has been instrumental. So that's where if I go to a conference, I'm queuing on those sessions because I want to hear those conversations. How can I do my job better to engage those professionals? And so I'll do guiding principles exercise, visual listening exercises. There's a lot of tools in the toolbox out there, but I'll do it with educators as much as I do it with students. There's all sorts of engagement. And I think there's another piece to that is the community, how we tie to the community. This is not my school. I may not live in that district or that community, but ultimately that community wants to feel that this is really in the best for their kids and their staff members that work at that building. So I think that's been a focus too. That community tie has been important.
I do appreciate the way you talked about the professional work happening within schools, right? We both spend a lot of time in architecture and design firms, and we see spaces that are created so that professionals can practice a craft. And I think that more districts, increasingly, the more enlightened ones perhaps, approach their schools as spaces that should be designed for their professionals to practice a craft. And teaching, as we know, is a very high degree of difficulty craft. And the complexities, the challenges that educators navigate are profound. I'd love to hear you talk about that and your appreciation for that. And actually, you brought up the community, right? And schools as a central part of a social community, of a civic community, right? And I think we both agree that schools really should be the heartbeat of a community. Here, I'm curious, every district is different and every project is different, right? And I'm curious what your instincts tell you about, to what degree a school should be a mirror of its community, or to what degree a school should be a catalyst for progress, whatever that might mean within a community. How do you think about that as far as schools as a social institution? Should they perfectly reflect the community, or should they serve a broader, perhaps grander vision for development and growth?
I think I can easily speak to this from my background, right? I grew up in a little tiny community. It was a mile by a mile square, little tiny school district in upstate New York. That they were community schools. There was an elementary, middle school, junior high, and high school. That's all the district had. My graduating class was 120 people. And I had two brothers that are older than me, went through before it, but my mom would come down for teacher conferences. And she knew every one of my teachers on a personal level. They'd have dinner together. They hey, if Larry needs a good crack, give him a crack. Because back then, it was like, you're going to discipline him as much as I am, but then let me know when he gets home so I can make sure we right the ship, right? Because again, I had two brothers that kind of maybe were not on the straight path. But I knew it taught respect. It taught what that community piece really meant to people, because when they sent us to school, they knew who was going to be educating us. And they had faith in them on that friendship level that they were entrusted to really do that. Do we have that anymore? I don't know. So we talk about community schools, but so when we're working in a district, I think the community view has changed a bit, for better, for worse, and there is definitely good parts to safety and security. But if there's people on campus that are not normally on campus, is that a good or a bad behavior, and what is that reaction? Versus now we're talking a lot more about, hey, there's an opportunity here for a wellness center on the campus or in the school. There's an opportunity for a community room in the school. Can we provide some of these services that are just not for that K-12 environment? Can we do it for the teaching staff, so then they don't have to drive across town for the medical? They can be right here if they got to go see the doctor or a counselor. And is there an opportunity then for our adults of our community who want to get additional education to come back and use the same environment and have those resources? That's where I see a lot of opportunity in community use and community ties. Again, there's some concerns with that from a safety standpoint. You don't know them. You know people who are in your school and expected to be in your school. So how do we do that from an architectural standpoint? Then the conversation has to be there, both with the board, the community, the teachers, right? We have to assure the teaching staff that we're doing what's in best interest for everybody, and make sure we have those conversations early. Do you understand what this implies and this implication is? That's where they can be successful.
There's an interesting boundary you're pointing out there between the school as, in some respects, a guarded safe haven, and the school as a place where the boundary between community and learning is not as clear. There's a tension there. Speaking of tension, I'm curious, right? You've worked on many school projects in many contexts, urban, rural, suburban, you name it, independent, public charter. You've taken some risks as an architect, right? I'm sure, right? So tell me, what are some of the riskier decisions you've advocated for, right? And now this is in light of the context that you've learned about your clients, right? So you're acting as an advocate and ambassador for an idea, right? What are some of the risks you've run as an architect previously, and how did they work out?
There's always, this is the client. They have a project in mind. They have a budget in mind, and they always have a time frame in mind. One of the hardest conversations, and we're trying to teach all of our staff this, is we have to control that schedule in some capacity. Now, we get it. We don't want to open a school in October. We want to open them in August or whatever before school. We want to open them maybe mid-year, right? But other than that, we don't want to open them in February. We don't want to open them in that midstream. So we get that part. So case in point, it was my home district. I knew the board members, superintendent pretty well. I was newly appointed to them from the firm. Our former manager had moved to Virginia office. The schedule started to drift a bit. And superintendent grabbed me one day. He says, hey, I have a big concern, and my board's kind of concerned because every time you walk in for a presentation, we're out a couple more months. Months mean dollars. Months means that our students aren't in that new environment. We're not under construction. Is everything all right? You guys are a big player in the game of education. 80 plus staff. That's what you touted. That you have the resources. Do you have the resources? I said, Mike, we absolutely have the resources. I said, the bigger thing is, are we having all the conversations we need to have? Because there's tens of thousands of conversations that go on in this design of this project, in the delivery of this project. We want to do it right. You're doing this once. You're spending a lot of money. Your board may be upset with me, and I'll take that heat. That's my role. That the schedule's not where we said it was going to be. It's shifted. Very good reasons, though, because you're spending a ton of money on this project. And it just so happened, he goes, well, I don't like it, but I agree with that. And lo and behold, we extend the schedule out about 7 months on them. And just as soon as we start construction, we ran into COVID. And contractors stopped. Districts were discussing, do we proceed? Do we shut down the process? They deemed it was important that they keep moving on this school because it was a 3-year construction window. And here we go in front of the boards again, virtually. Like, what are we going to do? How are you going to get this up back on track? We held meetings with the stakeholders and the contractors all in the same room. How can we work and proceed? How can we do this? And you know what? That conversation was one of the best conversations we ever had. But having board members as part of that conversation, they can hear it firsthand. That everybody was pulling in the same direction to get that building back on track and to get that facility opened as close to on time as possible. So along the way, in each phase, we made some concessions. Hey, you might not get your auditorium till October, but let's focus on the classroom spaces because kids are coming back. Let's focus on this because we need to do this. We ran into the procurement issues and some increase in cost. The board wasn't happy paying more because the taxpayers are paying the bill. But we had those conversations often and early, understanding, and everybody was on the same page, that they were difficult. We delivered the project on time. And we, with besides a few extra dollars due to COVID and procurement, it was delivered on budget. And at the end of the game, they're like, man, you did it right. But that early conversation of why did the schedule push, we could have been in a whole different place had we rushed that out the door. It wasn't properly finished. The questions weren't properly answered. And then we're guessing on the fly or we're making adjustments on the fly, especially when we got into that really difficult environment where the contractors had to know exactly what they were doing at any one time because there was no extra time to gain back.
Well, it caught my attention that the way I thought that question was phrased was really about architectural risks. And what you've highlighted here is a process risk you took that really deepened collaboration. It elevated the sophistication you guys had around what you were doing and why you were doing it. So I think that's actually it caught me by surprise that that's the direction you took that, and I really appreciate that.
Well, in the same token on that, I can use that same project, right? They didn't have but one building that had collaborative spaces in it. It was their first elementary in 65 years. So when we brought that conversation to the table, that's a risky conversation for a district that was, let's call it traditional, right? Their whole board, their whole population in that area, they all went to school to same schools. They all went there from the 60s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. And they were like, well, what's wrong with our education? I went to school there, 55 and 60, and I'm doing fine. I managed a career. I managed a family. Bringing those conversations to them and trying to get them, not to change their mindset, but to open their mindset to other opportunities. And it was based on the kids, it was based on the staff, and it was really a vision of that administration group when we started doing some of that. And today, they're still our client. I've been working with them for 18 years. We're doing 2 more projects for them right now. They're really pushing that boundary. They're having the conversations because they're used to having them. The principal at that first project is now the superintendent. I took him to an A4LE conference, and he was on his phone the whole day. Didn't say 2 words to me. And he's furiously writing on his phone. I'm like, wow, he's totally distracted with work. And I said to him, I said, hey, Phil, if you can't do dinner, you can definitely jump and go take care of business. I get your role. He goes, no. He goes, this is just so fascinating. These conversations are way above what I expected. He goes, I have so much more to bring back to my team. And I want to have all these conversations. I want to do these exercises. I really think we can elevate this whole project. And he did. And so when you have that project champion that's part of the client, that's when they're most successful.
It's interesting that comes full circle back to our conversation about to what degree should a school reflect the community and to what degree should it be a catalyst for change. Now you're describing a project and a district who, despite their own more conventional educational pedigrees, are using the design process as a catalyst for growth and progress, which is remarkable.
Yeah. From an architecture aspect, from a professional aspect on my side, it's probably the most gratifying besides watching kids walk into that building on the first day.
You know, when we work with schools at K-12, it's not just about furniture or design. It's about impact. Our radically student-centered approach puts students at the center of every decision. From that first conversation to the final walkthrough, we're focused on creating spaces that actually work for the kids, the teachers, and the community. So if you're looking to do more than just check a box on your next project, let's talk. Visit K12.com. That's KAY-TWELVE.com and see how we're helping schools transform learning one student at a time. Because at K-12, it's not just about projects and furniture, it's about purpose.
Let me jump more towards questions that may be a little bit more reflective for you, Larry. You've opened many schools, right? You've been a part of or led many school projects. After several years pass, right, and the dust has settled, the ribbons have been cut, the schools are fully operational. You go back, you check in, you're still working for the district, perhaps. How do you, Larry Levato, assess the success of a school project? What's on your rubric? What are the metrics that matter to you as an architect when you think about whether or not a project was quote unquote successful? And we'll leave that definition open-ended for you. How do you view that?
In our architecture world, K-12 market that we're in, the conversations are, it has to be adaptable, has to be flexible. It has to allow our staff and our students to thrive and flourish. It has to raise the bar for all of them. Student performance, staff achievement, all of those. And there's a whole series of buzzwords that go with that conversation. Flexibility and 21st century. Well, we're 2026, right? And I was just back in this school. I went in for an alumni thing or a education foundation that we support. And I went into an event and they had some student ambassadors. I don't know these students and they don't know me. And I walk in the door and they're like, hey, thank you for coming. We really appreciate all the support you're doing for the Education Foundation. Would you like a building tour? And I'm like, sure. I said, is there something you want to know about the building? And they're like, why, have you been here before? I said, yeah, I spent 8.5 years of my life working on this building so that you had an environment. They're like, oh, well, you're the architect. I said, well, I was one of a team, but I can show you where the roof access ladder is. I can show you where all the hidden secrets are. I said, but more so, I want to see how you're using your environment, because what we designed and what we talked about pre-COVID could be used differently now. And what we planned and what we thought would be, your staff has now had 4 or 5 years to work in that environment and adapt those uses and really make it that flexible place that they can educate and perform in. So as we walked around the school, I'm like, oh, well, this space, this was the conversation. This is awesome seeing it being used this way. And he goes, well, we also do this and we do this and we do this with it. I explained to him about all the conversations, media center, art. We did a huge STEAM lab outside of all the sciences. I'm like, let me ask you a question. Are all those garage doors open on a daily basis? Are they coming out into that environment? Oh, we just did an egg drop contest. We had science curriculum was presenting on the social stair. We had students around them engaged in the conversation. We even actually brought up the 8th graders because they're coming here next year so they can see how this environment's performing. So to see that, that's success to me, right? They have adapted that environment for their use. And the environment was flexible enough to allow them to do that. That was just, I walked out of there, a foot taller, chest pumped up, right? Really puffed out. And that was huge to me. And then I get, hey, great job on this building. And they were like, thank you for spending so much time in this environment. I am an introvert and I wouldn't thrive in the normal environment. This gave me opportunity to go out and find what was me. And so they went from that 30 seats in a classroom approach to education to now individualized training plans with their students so that each student can thrive in their own process. And they gave the flexibility to the staff to be able to guide those students on their journeys. That was probably the best day I've had this year.
That seems to me like a great definition of success right there as you articulated it, and remarkable work. Speaking of being guided, right? I'm actually interested a little bit in your own journey as an architect within your professional community, right? So as our audience will know, you're actively involved in A4LE leadership. I actually would like to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about that, right? And I want to ask something really specific, right? We know that this is a rich community of forward-thinking designers and educators and furniture companies and people who are really invested in better student outcomes, better learning environments. But what have you specifically as an architect learned from your peers in this association that you feel like has really helped you grow, flourish, become more inquisitive, become more curious as an architect?
Yep. I think 18 years now that I've been part of the association. I got pulled to a conference. Let's go. Really eye-opening to the conversations, especially when I was, 8 years into my education journey, if you will, in educational architecture. I started volunteering because I wanted to be involved more. And at the conferences, at the regional level, then you're interacting with, like you said, there's a whole spectrum of people in the community. It's not just architects. There's educators that are looking for that value in those conversations. That was a huge mentoring piece for me. There's people who have been in the association for years that have really allowed my growth to happen. They've mentored me specifically, personally, like, hey, we should get together and collaborate on this, or at least talk about this. And they could be an architect from another state. They can be a competition in the world of the professional world. The collaboration and the exchange of ideas and the exchange of thoughts has been paramount in my growth. I relish that. I enjoy their successes as much as ours. Again, it's about the educational environment. I got involved with, obviously, volunteering in the Northeast region. I went up through their leadership. I had a couple people pull me and say, you need to do this. And then when you get up through, the leadership role, you realize that you're now been around for a while. So you're that sage. You're that voice of the history of how we got from A to B over the last 10 or 15 years. You're one of those voices, right? And we're still having that thought exchange and that idea. What are we doing now? What are we experiencing? I get, hey, we think you might be a good fit for the global board. I said, okay. So I pick up the phone, call one of my peers. He's a competitor. And I said, what am I getting into? What does this mean? I go back and have the conversation with my wife. I have the conversation with my family. I have it with my employer. Like, I have this opportunity. And I get nothing but 100%. You should do this. Go all in. You go all in for everything you want to do. Go get involved. Go be and work in that mentoring role for others. Partway through that journey, they're like, hey, would you consider being on the executive board? Really strategically thinking about what the association is doing, where it's going, how do we grow membership? How do we get more educators involved? Are we having the right conversations? That's big picture thinking. It's exhilarating being part of that process. So that's really been that catalyst. That for me is my education didn't stop when I walked out of college, out of architecture school. I've been able to grow that for the last 27 years. And I did the same thing with a reserve military career for 21. And the conversations, the interactions, I just think that's really kind of provided me with that education component. Keep learning as you go, because you never stop learning. So I think that's been the biggest part of my journey.
Well, let's take it full circle here. So in the office in which we sit, you're surrounded by incredible young architects and designers and project managers, technical experts, big thinkers. You're surrounded by everybody. What advice might you offer to young architects, young interior designers, young educational furniture professionals who really want to grow and thrive? What are some pointers that you might give them as they begin their journeys?
Yeah, all too often, and especially in the architecture side of this, and probably interiors to a degree, we come out and we have a vision. I grew up and I wanted to be a residential architect. Didn't realize those other pathways were there. We have a staff here. They've invested in our journey currently. It may not be their total journey. They may move on to other avenues. They may want to practice a different type of architecture. So we've created an organic mentoring process so that they can grow. We meet with them, and we don't just do a yearly employee review. We meet with them often. I laugh because I have an office, but I'm not in there probably 30, 40 minutes a day because I'm out in the staff. I want to know what they're experiencing. I want to know where their frustrations are. I want to offer them some guidance, but I more so want to listen to see if there's something we can do to adjust that for them so that they can grow and thrive. And they want to be here. We have a number of staff that do that same thing. And I think those conversations are really, quote, if you will, a legacy to them that I can leave to them. Like, my door is always open. They're probably going to wear the carpet out in front of my office getting to my office. That's great. I welcome that. And it's okay. I'll get my stuff done. I always manage, right? But I welcome those conversations. I want to know them on a personal level. It's not just a work environment. Everybody has stuff outside of here. And if I know what's going on out there a little bit, I can be a little bit more receptive to their performance here and where I need to take them or guide them. And I think those conversations are the biggest part of my day, and something I focus on. I think that staff, they deserve the guiding that I had. Hopefully I can do it better. There's some interesting conversations there. There's some, especially in an age difference. I'm not young anymore, but hearing their conversations and their enthusiasm, we have to lift that enthusiasm and capture it. We don't want to bury it. We don't want to quell it. We don't want to push it down, because they have some great ideas. And technology-wise, they're still reading, they're still learning, they're still yearning for that, hey, did you see this? Have you experienced this? Have you guys done this? Can we do this? That's where our office is, and that's I can't say enough about that process here and where it's taken me and allowed me to be in that role.
Well, I think mentorship as a broad category, being a guide, is something that can go so well and it can go so poorly, right? As we know, the best mentors, they don't do it for the up and comers. They simply talk about the terrain and the landscape ahead and talk about what may be out there and let folks learn. And it's an iterative process, right? Where they're workshopping ideas and they're learning from mistakes. And I think that's the type of culture that I think you exude.
This whole office has done that client-oriented approach to our work. We really talk to our staff about what that means to them, so that Yeah, there's going to be difficult conversations. There's going to be challenges. There's no doubt that there's going to be unhappy clients at some point, unhappy school board or unhappy principal. We didn't listen. We didn't do it right. There's ways to approach that. There's ways to have those conversations and understand it's not a personal thing. It's a growth thing. So take advantage of that operation or that conversation and see if you can change that conversation for the positives in it. There's always positives in everything that we do. You got to look for those. And I think if you teach your staff that and mentor the staff to do that, it gives the avenue like, hey, this isn't the first time we've been doing this. We've done it for 40 years. In 40 years with hundreds or thousands of clients, we've had upset clients. It's a matter of how we approach them. Why do we still have the very first client that ever did an education project in the 90s with us is still our client to this day? Because we've gone back and said, hey, we can do this better. Let's have the hard conversation. We're here for you. We're here for that school. We're here for that district.
On the educational side, I can really relate to that, to the type of environment that allows critical reflection, right? And as an educational practitioner, folks might come in and watch me teach and come away and think, oh, that was a really effective and engaging experience. And meanwhile, my perspective was, I made mistakes every 3 minutes. I did something wrong. I could have done everything better. And that type of culture to promote, a critical self-awareness, I think is really amazing. And especially for young architects and designers to grow in that environment.
And then going back and having conversations and seeing that environment and how it's either working or not, or, hearing that feedback. And I get it. All the schools I go back and take other clients through. I welcome those conversations. Not everything is perfect, but the conversations at the time kind of dictated what we did if we listened properly. Does it fit every environment now? There could be some changes. There's definitely room for growth in everything that we do. Then are you receptive to those conversations?
Well, let me close by asking you a little bit about how you view or hope to view your legacy, right? So, both in architecture and in A4LE, right? When you hang it up, down the road, what's the impact that you hope to have left behind you, right?
Broad brushstrokes. Did I leave it better than when I started? In my roles in A4LE, they're fast hitting. You're in leadership for a year or two or three, then you move on to something else. Did you improve upon it? If you set some goals and set realistic goals, and you got to set some hard-reaching goals. Don't just come in with easy goals like, yeah, I can achieve that. I'll feel better. But you set those hard goals and you work on them. And if you can get to a couple of them, fantastic. But I think that so-called legacy piece, I don't think of that in my terms. That's not me. I'm pretty selfless. I'm not that person. But if I can influence and improve upon somebody else's career projection, where they're going, what they've been exposed to, meet some of their goals, listen to some of their concerns, and let them take the reins. Let them go to the board meetings. Let them present to the client. Hey, I'm right here next to you. The old guy in the office is sitting right here, right next to you. So if there's a hard question, just say, hey, can you help me out with this? There's no harm in foul doing that. It's that board has an understanding that Larry's here for a reason, or that senior leadership is there for a reason. But let this project manager grow and learn and have those conversations so that they're really providing us with a better environment. That's where I thrive. And that if I can leave it better than when I started, that's my long-term goal.
Larry, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you for making the time.
Mark, appreciate it. I know it's been a while in coming to get me to the microphone. So I thank you.
Yes, sir.
The Better Learning Podcast is produced by Matt Rogers and edited by Kelly Jones. The views and opinions shared on this podcast are those of the individual speaking and do not necessarily represent the perspectives of their affiliated companies, organizations, or associations.